Good morning, everyone. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Good morning, everyone. Wishing you all a beautiful day. And today is our fourth day of the breath exploration. And the reason why I am sharing this exploration, of course, that I'm in quarantine, and then I thought that this would be something to help me also re-understand the work that I'm doing, and I'm trying to discover and build for myself. I think a good way of building this courage or building that confidence to understand the work better is by sharing it. A teacher told me that we are students, and when we teach, we become a student again 2 times. So I'm sharing with you so that I get to embrace my understanding better and see how um, I perceive this subject of pranayama, breath work, um, the way that I would like to perceive, or just see if there's something new coming from this sharing session that I have with all of you. Now, I've been, yeah, good morning. Let me move this. Yeah, good morning to everyone. Yeah. So, I've been changing the positions that I am in for the last 3 days, and this is the fourth day. I've been changing my position. Now, the reason why I'm changing the position is simply because, in relation to daily life, we are moving beings. We continuously, or to a certain extent, we are moving. Um, okay, let me. It's a lot happening. Let me put the volume of all this different sounds coming in between down. Now, the reason why I keep changing the position is because in daily life we have this various positions that we're changing one from one dimension to another dimension. So, taking in consideration of that aspect, I thought that could our breath exploration be also something where we are not kind of confined to one position? Could we explore various positions? Could we also open our intelligence or our mind to this various positions we are changing from A to B to C? So I'm just exploring these different positions so that I'm inviting you to not be in a fixed position, as in pranayama is this position, because this breath environment is an environment which we are carrying into different facets of our life. It's not that we're only breathing at this part of our life, or we're breathing deep when we're lying down, or when you're standing up. We are breathing, and this is more of an exploration. And I'm not inviting you to make a deep breath or shallow breath. I'm not inviting you to create or follow any prescribed technique, but rather, if there's anything that I'm inviting all of us to do, is to become aware of what is happening there right now. Not in a way that we are demanding, not demanding attention, not having a certain preconceived idea about how to breathe and then create that or superimpose that kind of movement. So we're trying to remove all these preconceived notions and see if we can, as if observing someone who's asleep. Does that make sense? You are watching someone sleeping and you can't really tell them how to sleep because the sleeping is happening for that person. That person is being in sleep and you're watching that person sleeping. So the most you can do is not to wake that person up or not to shift that person from one position to another position or tell that person to sleep deeper. That means that person's not sleeping if you can have this conversation with that person. But rather just observe how that person is sleeping or how that person is in that environment of deep sleep or dream. It could be anything. So if this imaginary could help us now progress into the first part of the class, which is checking the climate of the body. How does my body feel today? So I'm sitting today, I'm actually sitting on the luggage chair, if you know what the luggage chair is in the room, in your hotel room. I've got my feet on the floor. I'm going to place my hands maybe on my knees or thighs, but this, how I place my body, really doesn't matter. But what matters to you is that how you are placing your body. So you could be seated, you could be in any position really, you could be even standing or even lying down. Try to explore different positions and see how your mind responds to this different position as we are moving in daily life. So let's start by sensing or feeling the body or scanning the body. You can begin from your legs up towards your head, or you can begin from your head downwards. Feel free to explore your body from anywhere that you feel that your body is calling you to be observant of this morning. I'm going to start exploring this morning, and if you wish to follow my exploration, or if you feel that this is not where you want to feel, you could go into your own map. I'm going to start by exploring from my groins. I'm going to start feeling my inner groins, the pelvic bones, and from there I would like to move into my right leg, from the thigh down into the knees, and then the lower legs, and then start moving into the left side of my leg, the upper leg, the knees and the lower leg. From there I would like to come back into the pelvic floor. And from the pelvic floor, develop a fair awareness or an investigation of how the pelvic floor feels, and then from there rise into the abdominal cavity. And thereafter into the diaphragmic cavity. Move into the thoracic region. And then into the clavicular region, the collarbone. I would like to move into my left shoulder, and then down into the upper arm, from there into the elbows of the left arm, the forearm, and thereafter the wrist, thumb and the fingers. From there into the right shoulder, right upper arm, the right elbow, forearms, the right side of the wrist, and the fingers and your thumb. From here, if we could move to the base of the neck, and then rise into the midsection of the neck, and then into the inferior part of the skull, I'm going to the front, to the jaw, and then into the nasal cavity, the frontal lobe of my brain, the crown, the back of my brain, and then the lower cortex, the occipital region, becoming aware if there's any shift in awareness from scanning the body, if there's any development in terms of sensation, in terms of if there are certain parts of your brains that has become fairly open, to the sensation of this body. And from there, I'd like to invite you to open your eyes if you've closed your eyes. And as we open the eyes, let's embrace light, forms, colors, shapes. And variables. All right. Now let's move into the breath exploration. So in the first class, we explored the lower ribs, and the second, the flat bone, which is your sternum. In the third class, we went to the side of the ribs, which is a broader part of your lungs. Today, I would like us to look at the segments in the lungs, and I'm introducing this anatomical view or perspective of the breath is so that we can have some amount of understanding what is in there, what is happening in there, what is the content of my lungs. So we have a fair amount of imaginary or an idea, so that we don't float too much about what is inside there. So we have a certain amount of idea what is the content of the lung, or what is the shape and form that there is there. So we can maybe work with that idea and use that idea as a map to sense. So when we're looking at the lobes of the lung, you have the right lobe of the lung and we have the left lobe of the lung. So when we look at the right lobe of the lung, it's divided into 3 segments, whereas the left lobe of the lung is divided into 2 segments. Okay, I've been reading and investigating, trying to find out why there is divisions in the lung. I couldn't really get a solid information why the lungs are divided into 2 lobes, or one side is 2 and one side is 3. It's got to do something with the heart on one side, so there on the left side, so therefore 2. But if you look at the size of the lung, it is kind of fairly the same, although the left side of the lung is slightly smaller. Nevertheless, most of the lung or lungs is at the posterior part of our body. It's mostly at the back part of the body. So this is a friendly picture. Let me position this well. So that's the right side of the lung. You have the upper lobe, the superior lobe, and then you have the lower lobe, the inferior lobe, and then you have the mid section there. And then we are looking at the left side of the lung. You have the upper lobe, and then we have directly the lower lobe of the lungs. And that little cavity there you see is where our beautiful heart, the position or the environment of our heart. Now let's look at the positioning. So this is the lateral view here, where my finger is pointing. You can see most of the lower lobe of the lung is kind of spilling into the posterior part of the body. And on this side, that's your left lung, you can see how that the lower part of the lung kind of goes into or is kind of embedded into the back of the lung. It's not really so much to the front of the lungs. And that's the posterior view of the lungs from the back. It's interesting that the shape, even the shape of the lung is kind of, it's oval shaped. If you remember the shape of the ribs, like a basket, so we can see how the ribs takes the shape of the lungs. So it's not that the content is a different shape and the container is different, but rather the, if I could say, that the container, which is the ribs, takes the shape of the content. So it's as if that the ribs are branching out from the column of the spine, from the posterior part into the front, into the sternum, the flat bone. Branch out, embracing the form and the shape of the lungs, which is kind of oval shape, round. Now why I'm saying this is so that we have certain amount of imaginary visuals in our mind that the lung is round and it's not flat. Again, why am I saying that? Because we have a tendency of thinking of maybe the lung is something flat this way. So it's not, it's something which is dimensional. It goes inwards and it is round. So we can have that imaginary of kind of a vacuum, like there's this swirling sense of how the air can swirl in an oval environment. Can we think of that? How the air kind of goes in circles. I'm not asking you to visualize that. I'm just saying that think of it as something which is in the front and back. And when I'm saying back, most of the lungs is in the back. So when I say that, can our exploration be towards the back of the lungs? Could that also mean that some of the back of our brains can be responsible in reflecting or perceiving the back of the lung? Because most of the frontal brain is kind of the busy brain which is trying to perceive the world. But let's look at the back of the brain, where we can become more introspective or more meditative. Maybe there's a connection of the back, why the lungs at the back of the posterior part of the body is larger, and that could influence the back brain. So through this exploration that we're going to do right now, we're going to sense the lobes of the lungs with our hands. Now what is nice is that we could sometimes use our hands to feel the movement coming from the lungs. If you looked at yesterday's video, I shared about certain parts of the video where I was sharing that let's not create the movement of the breath, but let the breath move the body. Let the breath breathe. That's our line. So let the movement come from the inner part of the lungs into the ribs, and from the ribs resonate or move into the flesh, the skin, the cloth, the textile that you're wearing, and into your fingers. That's one. Let the movement come. So we're not demanding when it's happening. In fact, it is happening. We are all breathing right now. It just becomes voluntary and involuntary. Sometimes you're observant of it or not. And we're using our hands like stethoscopes to feel, so that the hand becomes the middle person, like a guide to sense. So the fingers are going to give you information. The third aspect is, after a while we're going to take our hands away so that we don't have a guide anymore. So some part of the back brain has to could open up so that we can feel that movement without the middle person there. So in the beginning, we're going to take the middle person, which is the guide, which is the hand, to sense and feel the movement of the breath coming from within. And the next part is we're going to move the hands away so that the brain can directly perceive without the help or the assistance of the palms. Okay, so let's begin with the right side of the lung, and the upper lobe of the lung goes quite high up into the first rib. So let's take our palms and place our fingers and palms right at the top of the shoulders. And feel free if you want to close your eyes or you want to keep your eyes open. I would close my eyes because I easily get distracted when the eyes is dominant and they are strong. So when I close my eyes, I can now sense my arm feeling the shoulders more than when my eyes are open, because there's a lot of visuals in front of me. So let's start by not even looking for any movement to begin with, but let's place the palms softly on your right shoulder, not pressing into the shoulder. The reason why I'm saying that, so that if there's any information, let that information come or reach from the lungs into the fingers, rather than the fingers reaching in to pick the information out from the lungs. After some time, you may question yourself if you could feel any movement coming from behind the ribs, from the inside of the lungs into your right finger. It is not like that you're only breathing in the right top lobe of your lungs. You are breathing all over, on the right and the left. What we're doing is trying to sense the movement of the breath coming from the top lobe on the right side of the lungs through our fingers. And it may not be a big or a large amplified movement. It may be something very discreet, very intimate, and that's more than enough. Now let's bring our right hand down. So now we are removing the middle person, which is the hand, and see if we can fairly perceive the breath at that top lobe on the right side from our brains. from here, if we could now move into the mid lobe on the right side of the lungs, let's bring the middle person, which is our hand, to sense the breath. We're not demanding. We are rather waiting patiently. The fingers are waiting patiently for the breath to arrive into the fingers when it arrives. Let's move the right hand down and see if we could fairly perceive the mid right side of the lungs through our brains without the assistance of the fingers. From here, let's move into the inferior lobe of the lung, the lower part of the lungs on the right side. So I'm going to take my hand back this way like we do Sarvangasana, shoulder stand. But if this is a movement which is uncomfortable for your shoulder or your wrist, feel free to use the back of your palms to sense the movement at the lower ribs. Feel free to do that. In fact, I am doing that. Allow the breath, or wait patiently for the breath to arrive into the palms rather than poking the fingers to look for it. Let it come to you when it comes. And at times that our breath is so subtle and very soft and gentle, intimate, that it may not be a big format. It may be a very subtle and soft format, or a very soft wave coming into your fingers. So it is what you perceive. And let's take one last cycle. And then move the hands down, and now attempt to feel the lower lobe on the right side without the assistance of the palm. Before we move to the left side of the lung, if there's anything recent that you feel now with the right side of your lungs, or if there's anything, any new information that is coming to you, is your mind able to sink and be with that information? It could be about the breath, it could be about the right side of the body, it could be about your arm, it could be about your lungs. Now, if we could move to the left side, let's take the left palm and feel the top lobe on the left side of the lung. And sometimes, out of curiosity, maybe we tend to breathe deeper or heavier so that the breath can penetrate the fingers. I don't really see that as a necessity for now, but rather because the breathing is happening, and maybe we could just wait for the breath to reach the fingers. Now, let's bring the left arm down and sense the breath without the assistance of the arms. now let's sense the mid lobe, which on the left side we don't have a mid lobe of the lungs, but let's divide. We have the upper lobe, which is widely spread from the top to the bottom on the left side, but let's divide that upper lobe into the upper section and the lower section. So let's sense the rhythm of the breath through our fingers, palms, now let's bring the left palm down and sense the breath through our brains directly without the assistance of our left hand. And now let's sense the lower lobe on the left side. I'm taking my palms back. I'm using the back of my left palm to feel the sensation of the breath on the left side and the lower lobes. If you're pressing too much into the back of the lungs, you can renew by disconnecting the palms and renew the relationship that your fingers may have with the back of your lungs. Now let's bring our left palm down and perceive the breath without the assistance of the left hand. Now, if we could just let go of all the techniques of observing, of feeling, and sensing, if we could let go of that chapter and see what remains. If there's any sense of acceptance of my surrounding, of this body, mind, however it is, can I be with or in this environment without a need or without a call for any change? I would like to end our session, and if you would like to continue, you can just disconnect the live and continue. Oops. Most of what we are doing is to embrace changes which is naturally happening. If we understand the body is an environment which is constantly going through modification, the breath again is a collaboration which is also going through modification. The mind is a system in itself which is also going through constant modification. Can we understand these modifications, allowing it to happen, and as these modifications are happening, can I become observant, or can I train my mind to on the lights so that I can see this happening, this change is happening in the body, in the breath, in the mind, or in the environment around me? We may be doing that. The reason I'm bringing this up is at times so much of our yoga, we tend to make micro-managing changes. We tend to make all this little this is like, this change is not enough, I make another change and then become aware of that change, and then I make another change, then we're constantly making changes that we become caught in changes rather than becoming sorry, my sister is trying to call me in between. Acceptance, family. So rather than making more changes within the change, since there are already modifications happening, can I become more observant of those modifications? So this is what I'm inviting most of my students, or this is what I'm exploring, to maybe lessen the modifications through the practice, or become more observant of what is happening, so that we don't create more vrittis in the mind, but rather already that the mind is naturally, or the body and the breath is naturally providing various vrittis, and just become aware of that and accept that as a part of our environment, of what is there, so that we can find our peace with what is, or what we have, rather than constantly demanding something new. I hope we all develop a sense of acceptance with who we are, or what we are, or where we are. And hopefully through these different sessions of exploring the breath, it's amazing how the body and the mind, the breath, can become a map for us to renew our spiritual values. So not by rejecting the body, but rather embracing and knowing the body clearer and better. Better is a word, maybe from now. Wishing you all a beautiful day and hope to see you tomorrow. Love you all. Om.